Hi everyone, we've got Nicholas, Tollervey and Carrie-Anne presenting Code with Mo.
Good afternoon. I feel very teacherish because I've got half the room sitting in the back and the other half sort of here. I always want to go, now everybody at the back stand up and come forward or whatever, but I'm not going to do, no. Stay sat down. I say, it made me feel teacherish. I'm not telling you to do that. Well, let's get going. So this is to talk about a Python editor for beginner programmers, and we're going to tell you a little bit about what recent developments have been happening with Mu and why we are doing this with this sort of an editor. For those of you who don't know me, this is me in my natural habitat, which isn't actually programming Python. I was a classically trained musician at the Royal College of Music, and I earned my living playing tuba in orchestras for a while. Then I met my wife, who's actually with my kids in one of the rooms over there, and I did what every musician does when they need to earn actually regular money, which is I became a teacher. So that's me on my first day as a teacher. And that's 20 years ago today.
Sorry, which one is you?
You can tell because I'm the one not wearing a tie, which is a uniform violation. So there you go. I was told off about that. Setting a bad example. So I now work as a professional Python developer, having worked in education and things, but my educational background is in music. And I'm joined, the other two speakers are Carrie-Anne.
Okay, hello. So, yeah, this isn't my natural habitat either. I started life on this journey as a teacher. I was a classroom teacher teaching Boo, Hiss, ICT, and then pushed to introducing computer science into my classroom in around 2010, 2011, and it brought me to PYCON, thanks to Nicholas reaching out to me. And I might be more well known for my work now, which is I'm Director of Education at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, so I lead our educator support programs and all our free resources. And a big part of that is to do video, and so I have my own YouTube channel, and I also make computer science videos with other YouTube channels like Crash Course, which is what this is from. So my journey really started with Python and the Python community back when this photograph was taken. I think it's 2012, that's what I want to say.
You're probably right. 2011?
Maybe. I'm not sure which year it was. I met my husband there though, so I should really remember that. This was the first education track that happened at PyCon. And most of the people in this picture are developers, and there's a handful of us teachers in it. And I met some wonderful people who made me feel instantly like I was part of a community, and that there was no question that was too stupid a question to ask, and they really helped me on my journey to this, which is EuroPython, where I ended up giving a keynote talk. What? How did that happen? But it did. And during this keynote talk, I talked a lot about how wonderful Python is for education, but all the problems and barriers that exist for teachers or young people to be able to actually learn it. Because there's kind of an assumption that it's quite an easy language. It's, syntax is quite English friendly, so it must be really easy to teach with, which isn't always the case. There's still a lot of barriers. So what are the problems? Very quickly, this is my first one, but I always ask developers or anyone who says to me, "Oh, why don't you do this? Have you ever tried to actually sit down with 8-year-olds and trying to teach them how to program?" And I wish this was a video, not a photograph, because it looks like actually it's pretty easy. But this girl over here is twiddling her hair because she's not quite sure what's going on. These two are arguing about what they should be typing. It's chaos. And if you want to enjoy and embrace that chaos, please join us in the room. The other problem is transitioning children. At the moment, they have a lot of access to visual-based programming languages. So Scratch, Blockly are good examples. Very, very prominent around the world, especially here, in England, in the primary curriculum. But we have to transition children from these visual languages where they're very comfortable, it's very creative, it's very intuitive, it's a lot like Lego, to text-based programming. And quite often people say, okay, I want to go from scratch to Python. That seems like a logical step. But a lot of it is like this. Like, you know, everyone's probably seen this meme, how you draw an owl. You know, you start off with this and then colour in everything else. That's how it feels like sometimes when you're trying to teach Python to children. So one of the biggest problems then is software. So IDEs are a real problem. How do you get children programming in Python? Quite often they need to use a development environment, and quite often that environment will be not very intuitive for young people. It might look a little bit like this, which is Vim, I'm pretty sure, which I can't quit, so I don't use it. That's a problem for a lot of people. And then the inevitable happens is someone asks me this, why don't you just use idle? And then I want to kill myself, because it is not a great development environment at all. It's what we have on the Raspberry Pi because it's free, it comes free bundled with Python, but it has a whole bunch of problems. So at EuroPython, I stood up, I gave everyone homework, and that homework was to go away and really think about how as a community of people we could help teachers and children learn Python by improving a lot of the tools that we had, not just IDEs but also libraries, and thinking about people accessing those. And so someone very close to home I knew did the homework. Gold star.
This is the handover.
We're
playing kind of like tag wrestling, but this is a tag presentation, so I've just been tagged. So Carrie-Anne, in her EuroPython keynote, enumerated some things in an ideal world she would like to see in an editor. At that time, I was volunteering my time for the BBC Microbit project, and the BBC insisted that a browser-based editor was created, which I did. That's a JavaScript thing. And I wanted to make sure that the thing that I had written actually was going to be useful. So I went to, I don't know, about 6 or 7 of the local Python user groups. So I went to Cambridge, for example, and we played around with that. At Oxford, I went up to Leeds, Manchester, some of the London ones, and Sheffield as well was a memorable one. But what we got was a whole bunch of teachers and a whole bunch of developers in the room, and we ran a very quick workshop with the current state of MicroPython on the microbit with this browser-based editor. And in the first 5 minutes, everybody was like, the browser editor, this is great, it's so convenient, we can do this stuff. I've written my code, and I've got to download this thing, I've got to drag it over to this other thing, and hang on, how do I get onto the REPL again? And after a little bit of doing that, people found that this whole process of download, drag it across, do the thing, press the button, you've got a syntax error scrolling across a 5x5 LED matrix, it's hard. So we had a bit of a problem, really. I wanted to try and make microbits, MicroPython on the microbit as easy for people to use. And inspired by Carrie-Anne's keynote, I was there one Sunday afternoon, and it was raining, it was the autumn, and I thought, well, how hard can this be? Which is always a dangerous thought. And I hacked together the very first version of Mu. And over the sort of 2 or 3 weeks up until Christmas, it grew to being something usable, and this is what we had. So Carrie-Anne said that she wanted an obvious place where people could type code. Here's an obvious place with line numbers, because idle doesn't give you line numbers. So when you actually run the script and it says line 32 syntax error, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh, hang on. Was that 11 or 12? I can't remember. It's a pain in the backside. Okay. Clear, obvious buttons so that we know what we want to do. So you have file system related buttons up here, stuff to interact with the microbit. This was hilarious, I'll talk about that in a minute, but after discussing with teachers, they really like this. And some other helpful buttons. The important thing is it's a big, bold, child-friendly, without being childish, sort of an editor. And so people started using Mu, and it became popular because it became the offline editor for using MicroPython on the microbit. Because of course, if you're on a browser-based editor, you need to be connected to the internet to actually get the browser-based asset into the browser. So people found that it was very popular. Oh, you can't read this. So lots of people kept asking me could you turn new into a general Python editor? Jeremy Corbyn. I've not copied it yet, anyway. Search and replace NHS for Mu. My favourite bit of this is, unfortunately, Mu would be better if it was rebranded. Maybe start by changing the letters to DUP. Loads of cash when you do that. The important thing is that people were asking for improvements to Mu and a change in the way that Mu worked. They wanted the kind of the bold, friendly, accessible user interface that was easy to use, but they didn't want it just microbit, they wanted it as a generic Python editor. With that in mind, and the fact that I know the Raspberry Pi Foundation don't like you using their branding in a not very nice way, so this represents the Raspberry Pi Foundation, okay? It's a photograph of Babbage, the bear, and the Raspberry Pi Foundation have done an amazing thing, which is that they put money where their mouth is, and Carrie Ann got in touch with me and said, we would like to make this happen. And I'm a software contractor, so I've contracted for the Raspberry Pi Foundation for about 4 months now, with a view to doing those things, okay? So turning my goofy Sunday afternoon while it was raining hack into something that might actually be quite useful. So kudos to the Raspberry Pi Foundation for that. I wish more people would do that and pay for open source development as well. So what exactly did we do in order to know that we were going to build something that was useful? Well, we took the unique step of actually asking teachers what would help, which shock horror, I know. So I went around a number of schools. Carrie Ann put me in touch with plenty of code clubs. I went to observe those. And at the end of each of those interactions, so for example, I would watch a GCSE lesson with some year 10s, interacting with Python for the first time. And I would video the teacher. Obviously, I'm not going to video the children for sort of legal reasons. And I've got a lot of feedback about what would work. We wish it would do this, if we could do this, or kids always fall over when this is the case, could use signals that they're about to make this mistake. So I gathered lots of evidence from teachers. This is actually at PyCon UK a few years ago. While I was at these code clubs and in these schools, I observed a lot of students learning Python for the first time. This is a sort of a typical experience that kids have. You know, they're all looking horrified at this thing that doesn't work. This is actually one of a sequence of photos. In the end, they're fist pumping the end because they managed to get the damn thing to work. So looking at the kids, trying to work out from their point of view what would be useful. If there's any pattern in all of these slides, it's that I've put the users as the focus of the development for Mu. And the users, the two primary users are, well, there are three users. There's beginner programmers like these. There are those that are supporting learning, like teachers and code club mentors. And the fourth lot are software developers who would like to enhance Mu such that they can make it a useful tool for their colleagues. So I also, being an experienced software developer, decided to draw on my experience as a software developer. A bit like teaching a musical instrument, you hold the violin in one particular way. Okay, you don't hold it down here, there's a reason you hold it up there. And there are some reasons that you don't, first of all, appreciate when you take your first steps as a programmer as to why software developers work in this way or that way or the other way. And part of that is some of the ways in which a code editor works. So this is all added into this mix. And then, of course, I would create stuff, I would experiment, I would show people, they would break it, I would fix it, and I would go back to the beginning. And this is a process that is happening today. This morning at 11:30 we ran a workshop, and Johnny was running around with a laptop going, I found another bug. This little kid over here, he managed to crash it on the Raspberry Pi, something's happened, we need to get the logs and blah, 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 blah. If you're thinking, oh, that sounds terrible, it's not. I actually really enjoy it when people find bugs in my code because it's something I can fix. What I don't like is when people go, oh, it didn't work. Yeah, and what didn't work? What did you do? What were you doing? And so being able to observe students breaking things in their natural environment, I'm starting to turn this Richard Attenborough here, it was a very valuable thing for me. And what we've tried to do is distill all this stuff into a new philosophy for creating a coding environment for children, and this is the philosophy. Less is more, so remove all unnecessary distractions, because if you put buttons, people are going to go click them, okay? So you only want to put the buttons that are going to be useful on there. Some IDEs aimed at beginners have lots of buttons, or they have a bunch of menus, and the amount of times you can kind of get your knickers in a twist just because you've done the wrong thing and you don't know how to get out of it, or idle has created a window and it's now hidden, or something like that. We wanted to keep it as simple as possible, so you only see the obvious stuff. Keep it simple. Okay, so Mu is easy to understand. You're taking your first steps as a software developer, and if the tool that you're using looks like a 747 flight deck, you're going to be worried about using the tool to access Python. What you want to be worrying about is Python itself and the task, the learning activity that you've been given. Walk the path of least resistance, so Mu should be easy. This is a bit like the Pythonic, there should be one and only one way of doing something. Okay, so if you want to save a file, there's just a save button, a single save button, okay, things like that. And it should be fun as well. We want to make it so that kids don't have this download the thing, pull the button, press the lever, stand on one leg, stick your finger in there, and if you whistle God Save the Queen, it might work. What we want them to do is just press the button, have the code run in an obvious way. They can see what problems they might have, or they can fist pump the air because their code works, and then they feel like they have the wind in their sails. Okay. Now, I really like this quote. This is Alan Kay. This is a quote from just a few weeks ago, but it's a great way of summarising perhaps what we are trying to do with Mu, and it really chimes with me because he mentions music education, and a lot of the time. I know I do a lot of work doing education-related things to do with programming and Python and computing, but my heart is in music education, and music education has 500 years of experience upon which to draw. And I really think if there's one piece of advice to absolutely everybody in this room, go and look what music education does, and then see if you can transpose that into computing education. And a lot of what, for example, the Raspberry Pi Foundation are doing, intentionally or not, is very similar to what music teachers are doing as well. So, what's Alan Kay saying? He's talking about Seymour Papert, the creator of the logo language, and he said Papert realised, we could take the real content out there as a version of the child's world that is still the real thing. It's not a fake version of that. It's kind of like Little League or even T-ball. In sports they do this all the time. In music they do it all the time. The idea is that you never let the child do something that isn't the real thing. But you have to work your ass off to figure out what the real thing is in the context of the way their minds are working at that developmental level. Okay? You don't put children into the London Symphony Orchestra, but you have a school band, and they learn how to play music in the context of the school band. You don't put students in the middle of a Google summer of code, but what you do is you allow them to attend a code club, things like that. That's what we're looking at. And Mu is not dropping people into Visual Studio or Vim or, heaven forbid, Emacs. It's trying to put them, I can see people grimacing now, it's trying to put kids into something that works for them at that moment of their development, their very first steps into programming. So I've got about 3 minutes left, which is an ideal amount of time for a demo to blow up. So I'm going to give you a very quick demo of Mu, and I'm going to do it in such a way that I can't see what the hell's going on. There we go. So this is the latest version of Mu. It looks very similar to the first version in that there's an obvious place where you write your code. But the thing that has changed is that down here, you can see it says Python. There are currently 3 modes. There's general Python mode, which is what it's in here, because it says so down here. And there is also, I knew this would do my neck in. There's the microbit mode, which is how the old editor worked. And there's an Adafruit CircuitPython mode. Adafruit are an American company who do educational devices, and they have a flavour of MicroPython called CircuitPython. So the best way to think of that is like Linux distros. It's like the difference between Red Hat or Debian or something like that. So CircuitPython is their version of MicroPython with their APIs for their boards, all implemented. But the thing that I worked on for, apart from re-architecting so that you could get this modular structure, is the Python mode here. So this is generic Python mode. And you just type code. I can't even see what I'm typing here. But you've got sort of call tips and things like that coming up. Okay, and if you want it to run, you click the run button, and I need to save it, of course. You see, I told you the demo gods aren't smiling at me. So I'm going to call this test 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it's printed hello down here. This is standard out, but it's also standard in, standard out is in that window at the bottom. I can click stop, get out of that. There's a REPL as well, the re-evaluate print loop. But we're very lucky in Python. We have an amazing sort of set of REPL-based tools in the form of IronPython and Jupyter notebooks. So that is what you get down here. Okay, this is a proper Jupyter notebook. So you can do all that map live embedding graphics and all this sort of stuff down there as well. And that also has sort of call tips and stuff like that. What else? I said I would talk about these as well. Teachers, as you're probably observing at the back of the room, find it important that the kids see what's happening in code. So one of the biggest sort of unique features of Mu is that you can actually zoom in and zoom out. And when you show teachers this, they kind of go, that's amazing. To be honest with you, it's like 5 lines of code to implement that, but there you go. And also, as you can see from this particular projector, sometimes the actual projector is a bit shonky, especially in schools. So by having a high contrast mode or different themes, you can find the theme that works for you. Okay, I'm going to, that's a very quick overview of Mu. Quit there, go back here. And so we've got to a stage with this development of Mu where we can actually ask you to start to use it. So the Raspberry Pi Foundation, we're using it this morning with the kids. We want feedback from developers and teachers and other people interested in using Mu for educational purposes. Like I said, I love it when people give me bug reports. I really savour that because I can fix it. And so on Monday I'm going to be sprinting on Mu, and I'm going to be writing documentation that tells you how to install Mu on your Windows, Mac, Linux, Raspberry Pi machine so that you can test it. But why should you be interested in this? Well, here's kind of the core of the reason why I do the things that I do. It's because what we do as educators, it makes our future possible. And what that future is depends on who turns up to provide such an education. You know, in 20 years' time, there might not be Python, but I would still like to come to conferences with people like my friends here in the Python community there, okay? Because the Python community is the best community I've ever had to interact with. And I've worked in lots of different software communities. So don't just sit there, download Mu, test it, play it around. I'd like to hear ideas. I might not agree with you, but I promise that I will be robust, yet respectful, if that's the case, okay? Oh, that is the app. That's the last slide. So I'm just to come to the end of the talk. Thank you very much. We have about 2 minutes for questions. Yes?
Would you put features in that I as a developer would use, but that wouldn't be used for education?
No. This is most definitely a development tool for beginner programmers. How do you know you're a beginner programmer and Mu is appropriate? If you are able to ask for a feature in Mu, then you understand enough about technology, okay, to go and graduate. So Mu is a stepping stone. I use the analogy of a toddler. Okay? You have complete beginners, like babies, who just sit there, as you're about to find out. And then you have kids that run around and they're active and they can explore their environment. But in between those two stages, there's this toddling stage where kids are pulling themselves up, they're figuring out that you can sort of kneel and you can bottom shuffle, and they kind of come up with all sorts of creative ways of evolving how to move around. It's also a pain in the backside, as you'll find out, because if you put your baby down and you expect it to still be there and it's wandered off, it's not a very good thing to, when it happened to me for the first time, it was quite frightening, really. But Mu is for that toddling stage. You're not just sitting there doing nothing, you want to engage with coding, okay? But you're not running around. If you're running around and you can ask questions like the one that you just asked, then you should be using a proper code editor, because you've obviously built a mental model of what a coding editor should be. So Mu is that toddling phase. How do I work out how to engage with my coding? There was a question there. This will be the last question.
Yeah, does it work for not microbit stuff? Like, can you just use it for as Python?
Yes, that was okay. Perhaps you dozed off for the last 10 minutes. That was the whole point of. I did explain that. Yes. Okay. Okay. So yes, you can. So perhaps we might have time for just a very, very short question. No. Okay. Very quickly.
Have you done anything different with the error messages?
Okay, so rather than having syntax error, stack trace, look at blah, 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 it all looks like Klingon to a beginner. No. That would mean changing the Python language.
Right.
Okay, but that's something I would like to look at. And to give Guido credit, he's very passionate about Python in education in the late 90s. He had a project called Python for Everyone, where he got funding from DARPA, where he tried out coding environments that were based on Python, and he improved the Python language as a result of the feedback he got from that. He was also going to do something that you do, but he ran out of money. He was going to create a whole curriculum based around this, and code clubs and blah, 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 but they pulled the plug on that. So I think the Python community, the technical aspect of this, they are very au fait and welcoming to suggestions about how we might improve Python for educational purposes. But it's also the IEEE said Python is the most popular professional programming language in the world for 2017. So it also has to work as a professional programming language as well. So I don't know. It's striking a balance, I guess. I guess we better stop.
Yeah, we're out of time.
Okay. Thank you very much, folks.